Welcome to the Upland Nation podcast. I'm Scott Linden, your host. Glad you could join me as we get closer and closer to Christmas. Are you on the naughty list or the nice list? By now, it's too late for just about everything in that regard. So hope you're scoring big and you don't get a lump of coal in your stocking this year. And I hope you're getting out and doing some hunting as well. I'm going to talk a little bit about a couple recent hunts. In fact, the major portion of the podcast will be a debrief on it turned out to be a quail and a pheasant hunt in some interesting country with a very good friend. So we'll talk about that at length. But we'll also have the Upland Nation puzzler and a prize. You might be able to win a new over-the-shoulder Jaeger lead of my design. And it's all made possible by RuffLand Performance Kennels, Happy Jack Dog Care Products, Pointer Shotguns, Dr. Tim's Natural Performance Dog Food, and welcome to our newest sponsor, Mid-Valley Clays and Shooting School. The Upland Nation podcast is brought to you in part by Sage and Breaker Gun Care Products, crafted at the highest caliber. Sign up for the mailing list. You'll get first notice of their very rare sales and all the new products that come around the corner at sageandbreaker.com. And Legacy Sports, they bring in the Pointer Shotguns. LegacySports.com is their address. Find out about all those new colors, Cerakoted Acreus over and unders, and then their semi-automatics in olive drab, gray, and bronze, just to add a little flash to your shotgunning world. Make everybody else in the hunting party just a little jealous. It's all at LegacySports.com. Then click on the Pointer Shotguns tab. Well, you know, it's funny how all these things work, and this one is a classic example of the social media working in a really good way. You know, we look at the bad side quite often, but the good side works as well. This is a person who I initially met and corresponded with back and forth on Facebook. We had some things in common. We lived in the same general area. We hunted some of the same general areas and enjoyed talking back and forth with this guy. And then another friend and I were hunting chuckers, and it turns out Hungarian partridge too, in the middle of freaking nowhere. And we had split up and we were going to get back to the same spot, a little water hole, which actually had a picnic table. How it got there is beyond me, but I got there first, and I was drinking a beer, waiting for Ben to show up when up this really bad road that we had braved comes another pickup, laboring up over those boulders in first gear, maybe low four-wheel drive. And I'm looking at that truck thinking, man, that guy's crazy. And then I thought, well, he's got to be even crazier. He's pulling in and parking next to me. Out of the passenger side comes my friend Ben. Out of the other side comes the other guy. Ben says, yeah, I was walking up the hill and this guy drove by and said, are you lost? No. Are you trying to get somewhere? Yeah, I'm going up that hill over there. That's where we parked. My friend Scott Linden and I have been hunting all day, and I'm going back to get a beer with him. And this guy said, Scott Linden, I'll give you a ride. And sure enough, that's who it was, my good friend Mark Avolio. Let's welcome him to the show. How you been?
Good. Just bright sunny day here in Central Oregon. You
know, it's funny, when we talked about doing this podcast, we're hunting together, and we're going to talk about that at length in just a moment. But when we arranged the schedule here, your dogs were getting a few well-deserved days off. And so was mine. And it's because over the course of that last long weekend where we were all in the same area code, My dog had done a total of 50 miles in 3 days. I'm afraid to guess how many miles your dogs had done because you were covering bigger ground for a little bit of that. How are the dogs all doing?
They're doing fine. They're
Yeah.
doing fine. We avoided any porcupine issues, luckily, that weekend. So everybody's good.
Yeah, in fact, that was a funny day. We're not going to talk much about that day. There wasn't a lot to talk about, but the two porcupine finds. But it was still a beautiful day, and got some fellowship with our friend Felton as well, and saw some country. And you guys, with better eyes than me, saw several dozen to hundred elk in the distance, didn't you?
Yes, we did. We
Yeah.
did. They're as usual sitting on the property lines, so so they can make a quick escape legally.
Yeah, it's just like seasons. Do they read those regulations too?
They must. I swear they must.
Well, you're running all English setters and, kind of a wide variety of them. And I hunted with all three of them over the course of 2 days. Why'd you pick English setters?
I well, gosh, it goes back a long time from back when I lived in the Midwest. They were more of a predominant bird dog species there, and I like their style. I mean, the tail and the feathered tail and the style and so on. It just uh, it just makes things better as far as I'm concerned. It's visually pleasing.
Yeah.
Nothing against other breeds or anything, but the uh, when you're back east and a lot of grouse hunting and so on, it's about it. English setters, and you had all the George Bird Evans stuff too that kind of influences one in their late teens, early 20s as well.
Yeah, it's interesting. Maybe that is the time. We used to call them the Wonder Years back in the day, and not because of the TV show, but because there was a bread. Yeah, before the TV show, folks, there was a bread called Wonder Bread. Look it up. But our formative years are when a lot of those kind of, I'll call them aesthetic decisions are made, whether it's your taste in music or anything else, I'll bet. I'm still working on it here. Flick is as bad as your setters when it comes to attracting burrs and briars, at least on his ears, because his ears, I looked at them and I thought, he's got feathering on his ears that would match any English setter. Do you deal with that a lot? I mean, after that Monday hunt we did, I pulled half dozen or more off each ear.
Well, with my setters, I mean, we're still at the point where I shave them just before the season starts,
Uh-huh.
and they're still somewhat slick coated in terms of their bodies. But as you said, the ears and around the back sides of the ears
Yeah.
and the tails wind up attracting most of the burrs. Where we were hunting the last day has a lot of the bigger, I don't know what kind of burrs they're called, as opposed to the lice burrs. The lice burrs you can just comb out; it's no
Yeah.
big deal.
Yeah.
But those sort of oval shaped ones with the spikes on them, yeah, they are trouble. And in fact, after a while, you just, the dogs don't like you mess them with the tails when you're trying to get the burrs out. So the feathering is a little jagged on the tails of my dog because I wind up cutting them out. Look like sawtooth feathering.
Okay, so you're starting a trend, and that's way better than any of those doodle breeds, by the way. Uh, it's interesting. I didn't see you working on any of that. I worked on Flick a lot when we got home and got almost all of them out, but a couple didn't come out, and I just left them. I didn't want to go through the drama anymore. Now all but one are gone, and that one's probably going to fall off today. So I'm crossing my fingers. So you end up cutting those out of there most of the time.
Some of them,
Yeah.
particularly when you get into the tail and they
Yeah.
get knotted up. And one of the dogs has got a much thicker feathering on his tail than the other dogs do.
Mm-hmm.
It's just difference in individuals. And I've learned, for mine anyway, I'll give them a day
Yeah.
to pull them off
Yep.
because they're really actually, if I tried to pull some of those off, they wouldn't be happy, but they can pull them off themselves. And in fact, all three dogs I've had several dogs do this, not just these three. They'll pull the burrs off and set them outside of either their kennel or their doghouse,
Yeah, I believe it.
like a little pile. And so I'll wait a day or so and then go back over them.
Yeah,
And I use a kind of a burr comb type
yeah,
of thing. It's not a brush, and you can kind of saw them out of there with
yeah,
the burr comb. And
yeah.
then if all else fails, like we were talking, you either cut them out or you can actually roll them out with your fingers. But the
Yeah.
problem with that is eventually your fingers get sore.
Yeah, they do. They're sharper than you think. I think they're called teasel, Teasle. And then when I was leading a bunch of Cub Scouts, we used to call them porcupine eggs.
No, that's a good description.
Yeah, and that's pretty much what they look like. I want to take a moment and indulge me here, Mark, because I want to talk about that last day of our hunt because it was spectacular in many ways. In fact, you said that too. So we agree on yet another thing. But let me just give a little bit of backstory. You and I talk a lot. We hunt once in a while, and it's all wonderful. But in the course of doing all of that, you mentioned a place up in that town north of where I was parked at the time, and you said, yeah, come on up, do this, do that. And you might have mentioned the name of that person. But many years ago, when I was just getting out of the music business and I was in the public relations business, one of my clients was the Oregon Sheep Commission. Yeah, I know. I got all the glamour jobs. And the one person on that commission who was he always had my back. And these are ranchers. These are guys, they still have that stuff on their boots when they come to the meetings. Practical, salt of the earth guys. And this guy always had my back. So you said, come on up, and I'll meet you at this place. It's behind the general store, and it's in this place. You can't miss it. I drive up, and as I get to that wide spot in the road with two homes on it and a general store, the big sign says, so-and-so's ranch since 1915. And I'm thinking, oh, my God, that's the guy I used to work with. Here he is, right here. I knew he was out in this country. I didn't know right there. So I was honored because I respected that guy, Henry, so much. I was honored that we were able to to basically hunt right down the middle of his ranch. That was spectacular. And, you're the master at finding those kind of places. I mean, what brought you to, let me just describe it real quick. I know I have a guest, everybody, but let me just describe this as best I can. This is a 106-year-old sheep, cattle, and hay ranch in northeast Oregon. Rolling hills covered with bunchgrass and in some of the best places, cheatgrass. But at the bottom of some of these are creek bottoms. So you've got a pasture, you got a creek bottom that's, maybe 6 to 15 feet deep, depending on where you are. Well, it may be surrounded by hay fields or grass or CRP or something like that. Those creek bottoms are full of everything from Russian olive trees to teasel, and a lot of teasel, cattails, a lot of greenery, a lot of berry bushes and thickets, and of course on both sides, wire fences. And we'll talk about that in a moment too. But we got to walk up and down that creek, thanks to you, Mark. So tell me, what brings you to a place like that? When you're looking for places to hunt, why do you seek out places like Henry's place?
Well, there's a certain amount of luck involved to start with in terms of just getting access to these places.
Mm-hmm.
I'll make this as quick as possible, but I originally got pointed at that property through a referral.
Yeah.
When I was looking at some other property closer in Central Oregon. And it was like, well, this is enough acreage to do big running dogs. And the gentleman I was talking to said, oh, I've got a cousin who is looking for members at a club. And so he gave me his name. He actually came over to my house to sell me and another friend on the idea of joining this hunt club, if you can believe that or not.
It's nice to be wanted once in a while.
Yeah, yeah,
So I'm told,
exactly. So we went out there, took a look at the place, and to be honest with you, at that point, it was my first dog. I'd only had the dog for 6 months, and I was just looking to be able to really embrace the sport, the upland hunting sport with the bird dogs and so on. And so I knew one of the things that I had read and been told is, look, if you got these dogs, you're going to need ground. You just can't go and hunt have a half a section to hunt. You need big ground to hunt. And this was several thousand acres. And it had a mixed bag, it turns out, as we went over and took a look at it, a mixed bag of chuckers, huns, valley quail, and pheasants. And so you could literally, when the dog goes on point at any time, as it turned out, any one of those species could come up. So it was, it makes for an interesting hunt every time you go out. But you just look at the property, and it's got water, it's got brush, it's got hillsides, it's got the grass. The way they manage the property is what I would call, I guess maybe the right term would be almost benign. They don't, the irrigation they do is not pivots. It's managed on a holistic basis. And so it's, I've been hunting there for a long, long time, and it's just as good as it was back in the 90s, quite frankly.
You just used a word that I hadn't used in a while, but we made a TV show out in Kansas a few years ago at a place that was, it had transitioned to organic farming. And I called it dirty farming. That's an old term from way back where you still had fence rows, and you didn't kill out every bug and every weed and everything else. And it became just a mecca in this case for ringnecks. But down there at Henry's place, it was ringnecks and more, as the commercials go, wasn't it?
It was, and it still is.
Yeah.
And you just look at the property, and it's getting, as I found out, it's getting more and more difficult to get adequate acreage of ground to hunt. These ranches tend to get broken up over the years. Grandpa gives the two sons each half the ranch, and then they give their kids each half of their half of the ranch, and the next thing you know, nobody's got more than a couple of sections. And I've been real lucky in a couple of places I do hunt where that's not happened. And but the management of the ground and the way they ranch and farm contributes to that.
Yeah, absolutely right. And it does require, number one, a far-sighted owner, if you will, and then from there they've got to be a broad-minded manager on top of everything else. And next time I'm up in that country, I will go pay my compliments to Henry for his hard work and the fact that he's passed down that work ethic and that holistic ethic to his family as well. Let's get to hunting, because that's what this Upland Nation podcast is about. I'm Scott Linden, the host. That's my friend Mark Avolio, hunting buddy and Facebook friend. Yeah, it does work that way once in a while. When we were corresponding by text, I said, man, that was an incredible hunt. It was epic in many ways. And you said, yeah, it was, wasn't it? What about it? I mean, we walked a mile and a half downstream, turned around after lunch, walked a mile and a half or 2 miles upstream. What was it about that hunt that made it stick out in your mind?
Well, first of all, you have to have what I call a combination of things, and that events converge. We had a wonderfully cool day, not cold, a light breeze, high humidity, and so that meant the dogs could work all day long, or as long as we wanted them to. The scenting conditions were good, and we didn't have to contend with I call bad weather, which is great. And that was particularly the wind, and you get east of the Cascades, wind can be a huge factor. I mean, I've had days where I've had to pull the slide in on my travel trailer because it was so windy. And so it was overcast. So again, it didn't put a lot of pressure on the dogs in terms of heat, because you can have a 30-degree day, and if it's bright and sunny, the dogs, at least the longer haired dogs like we have, tend to feel the heat more, just in the sunshine, even if it's 30 degrees. So that was nice. And then we have one of these years too where we've got a good mixed bag of birds. It's kind of what I call a level. Well, all the birds that we're looking for, all the species are, I say, equally present.
Yeah.
You know, if you do this long enough, you realize there's definite cycles to the bird populations. And some years there's a lot of pheasants and not a lot of quail. Some years there's a lot of quail, not a lot of pheasants. And some years there's only chukar, et cetera, and so on. And this year there seems to be just a good balance of birds, which makes it even more exciting. It's almost like, again, sort of a lottery. Every time the dog goes on point, you saw that firsthand that day.
Oh yeah, yeah, it was incredible in so many ways, and I don't want to gush about that, but I do want to get down to the to the basics of how that works. You know, we talk about this a lot, and we cross our fingers in August and September when the biologists come out with their guesses about reproduction success and that sort of thing. But ultimately, it's a watershed by watershed situation, and you may have a really bad hatch in one area, but the next draw over it may be a good one. We got lucky on all of that. And we got lucky in, like you said, most of the bird species too over the course of that weekend. I'll talk more about those later. Pardon me. But, I saw more Hungarian partridge on Saturday of that weekend than I'd seen in the last 2 or 3 seasons put together. But down there at Henry's place, we had everything going for us. And interestingly, on that downstream walk in the morning, we had the wind at our back, which was, it could have been better. But, we learned to live with that. A smart dog knows what to do. And I'll never forget the first find we had. I thought my dog was pointing a porcupine after, Sundays. He's on your side, and he is rock solid. I couldn't find him. He was so camouflaged down there in the thick stuff. And his nose was right up against what I think was just a little clump of brush in a whole bunch of other brush. But you can tell, what your dogs look like, and it was not a porcupine point once I found him, and you could tell that with your dogs in both directions. He had come back around. He had worked his way downstream, which was also downwind, and then he'll come back quite often when I'm lucky and I fed him right. He'll come back and he'll work the wind in towards me, and he was on your side when he hit that point. And we're talking, 3-4 minutes before we could get down there. And you had to push your way through a thicket of some sort of little trees, didn't you?
Yes, yeah, and that that's a good point we said earlier. It's just a little bit of moisture in one draw or a mile to the east or west or whatever the case may be can make a huge difference in the cover and what holds birds. You wouldn't have known from hunting that creek bottom that we had a severe drought this summer.
And I've seen that before, and we'll talk about further south from where we were and some of the ranch hunts I've done down there with friends. But in this case, we hit it just right. That dog stayed steady. You walked down there. I think I even threw a rock or two trying to get that bird up while you were still up on top. But somebody had to go down, and you were on the correct side of the creek, so you got to mountaineer your way down. Did anybody shoot anything out of that flush?
I think you got that bird. As I said, as I was going down into the creek bottom through the brush, was like, cover me, I'm going in.
Yeah. And it was, by the way, when we say quail, we're talking valley quail out here, or what some people call California quail. If you're listening and you're east of the Rockies, you're probably visualizing a different bird, but these are incredible, as look it up if you don't know. But they will behave for a dog once in a while. And so we're working down that thing. And the thing that struck me, it struck you first, because you were the host, and you were, trying to set expectations. And you mentioned that these were all singles. We never busted a whole covey until the afternoon, did we?
Yeah, that was, one of the things I was going to try and mention earlier was that what was really nice about that day, and you don't get to see this very often, as you just said, is these quail for some reason were scattered out. Normally, particularly with the valley quail, it's like you get a covey pointed, maybe you get a bird out of it, you try and mark them down, you wait for, I don't know, 5, 10 minutes, give them a chance to settle down, and then you send the dogs back towards, send the dogs out to where you've marked the covey down. Um, I, we That wasn't the case. I mean, we got up, I think, in total 4 coveys that day. And if I recall correctly, because of the way they got up and the way we were spread out, I think you only got a shot at one of the coveys. I never shot at any of the covey rises. I was just not in the right position.
That was because I was being a good guest.
And but that was, again, to your point, it was very interesting. The birds were scattered out, and if I live to be 200 years old, I mean, I'll never understand why one day they're all bunched up in coveys of 30 and 40 birds, and then some days you find them scattered out like that and find coveys too. I don't quite, some biologist somewhere should, game bird biologist somewhere should chime in someday and explain why that behavior changes like that. I mean, the only thing I can think is I know there was a weather system coming in and they might have just been scattered out feeding, but that was like that all day from first thing in the morning to the last shot at 4 o'clock in the afternoon.
You're absolutely right, and that is a great observation. The other one that I would have, because we'll never get a biologist out from behind their desk to actually do some field work. Just kidding, everybody. That was a joke. If you're a game bird biologist out there, please help inform all of us about how that behavior begins and what causes it. But I'll never forget a time I was making a show in Kansas. Now, these are pheasants, maybe a little bit more hinky, maybe not. But I'm sitting there in front of the camera talking to the governor of Kansas, and we're talking, and in the background, we just keep hearing birds flying up. So I turn around, I look back there. There's a little draw, and there's, every 10 seconds, another rooster flies up out of that draw that we were going to hunt on TV. And sure enough, we conclude the conversation. The camera goes off. I turn around again, and out the bottom of that draw comes one coyote.
Yeah.
He had pushed every bird in that entire draw out of the draw, and we were starting over again somewhere else. So, I think a lot of times it might be predators. I don't know. If anybody else has a theory, share it with me on Facebook or send me an email or something, because I am intrigued by that. I wanted to get to this before our break, which is coming up, yes, in just a moment here at the Upland Nation podcast. We got a lot more to talk about in terms of valley quail and some other things, plus the Upland Nation Puzzler quiz and a prize, and your thoughts on the weekend. But first, Mark, so out of that creek bed, as you've said, who knows what's going to come up next? And something else did come up.
Well, we had pheasants too.
Yeah. So how do you load your gun for this thing? I mean, we did our best, I guess. I was shooting 7.5s in the right and 6s in the left. And I figured that put me at a disadvantage for both, which is usually how it works with me. But what about you?
I have I use 7.5s. I use good plated shot, which I found from experience years ago that keeps the pellets in better shape. You get better penetration. I won't name any brands, but I shoot 7.5s. Predominantly, there's what I call small birds involved.
Yeah.
Chukars, huns, and quail, and try and measure your shots, and by that I mean don't take bad shots or take iffy shots or questionable shots. I'm not quite sure what the right term is if you got a shot at a pheasant. But again, we're shooting over pointing dogs, and generally you're not going to get a shot much over 25 yards at a pheasant. And so the 7.5s are just fine, particularly if you've got good plated shot. And they work fine. I've killed a lot of pheasants with the 7.5s. But
sure.
On the other hand, some of the other ranches where it's predominantly going to be pheasants, I use 6s. I mean, it's really a matter of making sure you're tuned into the species you're going to hunt that day. But if you're going to shoot quail, my preference absolutely is 7.5s. And the other thing is chokes, improved
Hmm.
cylinder in both barrels,
Yeah.
which I know a lot of people like, well, that kind of defeats the purpose of two barrels. And I found that most of the problems, at least my personal opinion has been, is that most people are over choked when they go upland bird hunting, particularly if you're shooting over pointing dogs.
Yeah, I'm looking right now at a pattern paper from one of the Italian guns I gave away in a contest a long time ago, and they're patterning at 30 yards over there in Italy, and that pattern is, it's 3 feet across, period, at 30
Yeah.
yards.
Yeah. And I've actually taken the time and effort to go out with multiple gauges, with 7.5s and 6s, same ammunition manufacturer, and actually did the pattern thing.
Hmm.
And I can tell you that my shotguns, again, not naming any brands, improved cylinder puts 75% of the pellets with plated 7.5s in the circle at 25 yards.
Yeah,
And that's a wonderfully dense pattern for quail hunting, and for other birds too.
yeah,
Because and then if I can go off on a little tangent, I got a huge education shooting sporting clays,
sure.
and I learned a lot from guys who just shoot sporting clays. And I can distinctly remember one time where we were shooting a mini station, crossing mini station. I was missing every one of them, and I was like, how the hell is this happening? They're minis on a side which has very small target, and the guy I was shooting with goes, well, what are you doing shooting? I go, I got improved cylinder and 7.5s. And he goes, switch to improved cylinder, and if you got 9s, use those to get a
Yeah,
even denser
yeah.
pattern.
Hmm.
After that, I broke every one of them.
Hmm.
Literally, those birds were flying. The clay birds were flying through the pattern.
Yeah, I'm going to amplify that as well. I'm working with Trulock Chokes on some projects right now, and George Trulock, number one, is a brilliant man in many respects. But what he has taught me already is it's not the breadth of your shot pattern, and at times it's not even the depth of your shot pattern, because we know, pellets come out of the barrel and they spread out lengthwise and widthwise. It's the density. And the wrong choke or the wrong load or the wrong size shot, whatever it is, there are so many variables that affect the spaces in between the pellets. And he makes a good point. If you're going to pattern your gun at whatever you think is the appropriate distance, look at those pellet holes and see if there are any bird-sized spaces between the pellet holes. If there are, something needs attention.
Yeah, and the important thing there too, and one of the things that you have to make the transition to in your thinking, is when you pattern, you're patterning at a stationary target.
Mm-hmm.
So your pattern is the stringing and the density is not the same when you're moving the shotgun either.
Good
You tend
point.
to, yeah, so you intend to actually even stretch that pattern out further.
Yeah, so it just makes it even harder.
Right. Or put a different way, the density decreases as you string that
Yeah.
shot out.
All right. Just for the record, yeah, if any of the ammo folks are listening out there and they have any 7.5s for a 28 gauge, feel free to send it my way. I'm desperate for it right now. That although I had a very pleasant surprise over the weekend, I'll share that someday. Anyway, Mark, I'm going to give you a minute and a half, no more, to relax for a moment while I pay a couple bills around here. This is the Upland Nation podcast. That's Mark Avolio on that end. I'm Scott Linden on this end. Yeah, lots more to come, including your summary of your last weekend's hunt. But first, happyjackincorporated.com, happyjackinc.com could save you a trip to the vet once in a while. Yeah, Mark and I are talking about this hunt on Henry's Place. You run a ranch, and you run the ranch with sheep and cows and maybe a horse or two, and then who knows what else. You got a lot of barbed wire on that ranch, and Flick ran 50 miles over that 3-day weekend, and my guess is he probably crossed under, over, or through 50 wire fences. Knock wood, no serious problems, but he did have a scratch here, a little bit of a gouge there. Every once in a while, I check him after every hunt, and then once it's clean, I use Happy Jack Seal and Heal. You spray it on, it's pretty simple. No dog's going to object to it. It doesn't sting or anything like that. And it'll keep the dog from licking that wound. It's got a bittering agent in it that will prevent the dog from licking it off. It kind of sort of coalesces. I won't say harden because it's not like hard, but it seals off the wound so it will heal faster, and it keeps all the other bad stuff out for the next hunt and the next hunt and everything else. I did a video on this and a few other things, so go to the YouTube channel for me, Scott Linden Outdoors YouTube channel, and you can watch the whole video on wound management. But the critical factor in that is Seal and Heal from happyjackinc.com. And of course, I don't travel anywhere without my RuffLand kennel. Flick gets a real comfortable ride. He's safe in there. These are the folks. Doug Sangle developed the roto-molded dog kennel. You want to take a look at all of their products by going to RuffLandKennels.com, and Ruff is spelled just like your dog would spell it, R-U-F-F, RuffLand Kennels. Been using the heck out of the new dog bowls I got. You know Dr. Tim Hunt, the dog food guy I talk about. Well, he says if your dog is going to drink maltodextrin in a water mixture at the end of the day, the dog will drink it better out of a plastic bowl than out of a metal bowl. So I am using the heck out of the RuffLand Kennels accessories as well. Learn more at RuffLandKennels.com. Now, Mark, if you haven't bought your RuffLand Kennel or Happy Jack Incorporated stuff yet, that's okay. But if you went away, I'm going to be really mad at you. Are you still there?
I'm still here.
Good. Okay. By the way, how's the rest of that whiskey I left with you?
It was wonderful. It still is.
Yeah, again, I think I've mentioned this to you and to others. I try not to drink the same whiskey or the same craft beer twice if I can help it. And that was one I found just by sheer chance. And so enjoy it and thank you. It's the least I can do.
Oh, no, thank you.
Save me just a little bit. We're talking to Mark Avolio, one of my hunting buddies. Started out as a Facebook friend, and yeah, so it works once in a while, and I'm grateful for it. We share a lot of the same country, but that place we were at, Henry's Place, was I had never been on that highway before. I had never heard of that town you were staying in. And by the way, it's pretty cool, everybody. This club that Mark is in has been on that ranch for a long, long time, and like I said, there's one other building besides the two ranch places, and that's the general store. No longer in business. Front half still looks like it could be open from 1895, for example. Back end is now Mark's Clubhouse and bar and grill. Literally, we had both of those. But anyway, it was really, really wonderful to be around all that history, and then to be working on Henry's ground for a change. You did shoot a pheasant. That's what we were getting at when we were starting to talk about shot sizes and all that. You brought it down, but it was like so many other of those birds. It was a runner. And you had to go quite a ways. Neither of the dogs, I don't think, saw that bird go down.
No, and I've got, I think we talked before in another pod, different dogs have different personalities.
Yeah.
And the dog I had on the ground that day, I don't think he'd retrieve a bowl of dog food. He's not a retriever. He'll hunt dead. But in terms of retrieving birds or running birds or something, the crippled birds, it's just isn't what he does. It's just that simple. And so, unfortunately, when I knocked the bird down, it was kind of out in the open in a field, and I was able to track him down myself and finally run him to ground. But there's a good lesson there too, though. That bird essentially had expired when I got to him.
Yeah.
And that's why it's so important to follow up. If you hit a bird, it goes down, keep keep after it, or if you shot at a bird, and I've had this happen a number of times, where it's like, there's no way I missed that bird.
Yeah,
How did it not go down? I've had that happen where I follow up where I think I saw the bird fly to and found it stone dead 300 yards away. So just
absolutely.
and I've had that happen a number of different times. So just a quick note on, please follow up your shots if you have even any inkling whatsoever that you might have hit the bird. Like I said, I've had things where I shot a pheasant and thought, there's no way I missed that bird. It kind of went over a hill 40 yards away. I go up on top of the hill and it's there stone dead, but it never looked like it was going down.
Oh, I related one of those stories last week, and I'll relate another one, I'm sure, in another week or so, because it does happen almost on a daily basis. And part of that is we got to get our dogs a little bit more motivated. Part of it is this marking. And I've answered that question once or twice as well, especially in last week's newsletter. If you don't get the newsletter, check me out. Question about marking down birds and that sort of thing, but it's absolutely true. And in fact, it's funny. It did happen that afternoon. We were both hunting heading upstream, and of course the wind had swapped ends by then, and it was going in the wrong direction again. But we got a covey rise or two, and by rise, everything's relative. Picture yourselves. There's a creek at the bottom, and it's running, and there's all that vegetation, tangles of various sorts, broken ground, and you name it. But 12 to 15 feet on each side is the cliff, and we're walking basically the cliff, the creek, the top, looking down at the creek. So when a dog goes on point, most of those birds never get as high as where we are standing. So we're shooting down all the time, and that's my story, and I'm sticking to it. It's my excuse, and I will continue to use it. But once in a while, even the blind hog found the occasional acorn. And we hit a few, and we got some good retrieves and all that. But one that sticks out is both of us knew you hadn't hit that quail as it jetted off in that direction, downstream, essentially. And we continued hunting, but a certain wire hair in our party said, yeah, I don't think so. And son of a gun, if I didn't turn around 3 or 4 minutes later, and here comes Flick with a dead quail in his mouth. And it could only have been that quail, couldn't it?
It had to have been. I mean, I know for a fact we're the only ones who have hunted there for the last 10 or 12 days. I mean, so it wasn't like somebody else shot the quail and your dog eventually found it. But it was one of those, that's again a good example. It's one of those deals where, particularly with quail hunting, they have a tendency to pop up and go down. And as you shoot, and they pop up and they go down. You can't tell a lot of times if you hit that bird. And that's the one downside of having a dog that is not very good at finding dead birds or retrieving. I had no idea. I mean, I think at the time I said, I can't tell if I hit him or not. Well, your dog figured out I had. Thank God.
Yeah, and I had a Hungarian partridge story that I'll save for our next podcast in the same vein, but it is true. And let me suggest something that I don't know if I've mentioned this or not. I didn't. I thought I killed a chucker on a great overhead shot, one of the few I made last season in that regard. We couldn't find it. I had a pretty good idea where it was, and we searched pretty hard. It was getting toward dark, and so I wanted to find that thing. Never did. But on Flick's GPS collar controller, I can mark a spot. You know, we call them waypoints. You call them whatever you want. You've got ways to do that on some device. And I said, well, okay, let's just hunt back around and come into that spot from downwind at the end of the day, because it was on the way back to the truck anyhow. Sure enough, beep, beep, there goes the indicator. Flick is on point. He's got 2 of his 4 feet in the little creek. The other 2 are on dry ground, and he's pointing right at what looks to me a taxidermied live chucker. Sitting there, just staring at us, wondering why we're looking at him. And Flick his eyes are bulging, his tail's quivering. He wants that bird. I put 2 and 2 together, and sure enough, sent him for a, quote, retrieve, unquote. And all was well with the world. But it was because we didn't trust our own judgment when it came to what we hit and not hit. So, lesson there. we walked some incredible ground. And I got to tell you, Mark, one of the interesting things and most welcome aspects of the habitat at Henry's place was that patch we walked that was full of, the really tall bunchgrass that I'm pretty sure is called Great Basin Wild Rye. These are bunches, if you can imagine, everybody, a couple feet around at the bottom, and the grass grows up out of that in kind of a big bunch, and it goes generally vertically, and some of it's taller than you. And I have learned over the decades that stuff almost always has some kind of critter in it. Hopefully something we can shoot at. I remember a place years ago where every one of those bunches had one valley quail underneath it. I remember other places where, I'll never forget a ringneck that was running from bunch to bunch thinking he was, sneaking away from us. But when he hid behind the bunch, his tail stuck out the other side. Yeah, he didn't last long. But that was so fun and so thick. I mean, my legs are cramping up just thinking about fighting through that stuff. But we did get another bird there, and I know it's another story where, it doesn't have the happy ending. But what's the lesson in finding birds in that thick stuff, and what could we have done differently there? Tell people what you did.
Well, we were hunting in there. We'd already gotten some quail up, shot some quail in there, and, son of a gun, a rooster comes. Actually, a number of pheasants started to come up, and then there was what I call a sleeper rooster. The hens will go out first, and then I've learned over the years a lot of times, you get into a bunch of pheasants like that in thick cover, just stand there for a minute or so and just wait and see whose nerve breaks first. Mm-hmm. And son of a gun, the dogs were working in there, and they had been pointing, but again, hen pheasants, and darn if this sleeper rooster gets up. And, it was right to left crossing shot, no sweat shot, knocked him down immediately. And I'll try and shoot them twice just because they're such tough, ornery birds. But it went down so fast, I never even got a chance to pull the trigger a second time. And we lost the bird in the heavy cover. We had both dogs in there for how long. We had it marked. You had it marked for me so I could walk right to the spot. And it's one of those things where it happens. And as we talked later, I think my post-mortem on that is I've just closed my left eye, and so I have a tendency in those sort of going away birds to shoot off to the side because I don't quite get there's a little bit of drift that happens, a little more drift than you think because you have one eye closed, so you don't have the stereoscopic vision. I'm sure what I did is I shot him in the wing and didn't get pellets up into the head area. Broke the wing, he hit the ground, and he hit the ground running like a rabbit. We saw that happen, I think it was Sunday.
Yeah, we did.
If Flick hadn't been on that bird, that bird was 100 yards away from where he landed when your dog finally caught up to him. But fortunately, that was out in the open.
Yeah.
Who knows where that bird went. Although, I'm probably going to hunt there again this weekend, there's a chance if that bird's wing was broken that we'll find him again. At some point, which I've had that happen before. I mean, we were on a chucker hunting a couple of years ago.
Yeah, you and me.
I know. And again, a certain dog was involved there that I'd been out with a friend in this spot, and he had knocked down a chucker we couldn't find. And a week later, we came back to hunt that with your dog, and son of a gun, put him on the ground. Then about 2 minutes later, comes back with a chucker.
Live.
That was the bird that my buddy had knocked down and broken a wing.
Yeah, for all we know, he had chased it a quarter mile, to catch up to a runner like that. But again, you're right, Mark. What a great lesson.
Yeah. Again, there's nothing wrong with going back a week later. I've gone back 2 days later and found birds with broken wings.
Yeah.
They just, for some reason, they have a tendency to get away. But again, like you said, that was really thick cover that causes cramps at night.
Yeah. I got two things to take out of that one. The first is, I'm a fly fisher too. And, if I see a fish rising in a stream, I'm all over that. I see it. I look to the bank. Is that a the thickest willow on the bank right next to that rise, or is there a boulder of a certain shape? I mark it so specifically. And I like to think I do that a lot with birds when they hit the ground as well. Of course, it doesn't help when they run, but if they hit the ground good and dead, that helps a lot. But what I could have done in that case, and this is, I'm going to employ this strategy if I ever hit another bird this year, and that is when it hits the ground, the first thing I'm going to do, and in this case, I could have done it. I'm going to count. I was on that wire fence, and I should have counted fence posts. That's what I should have done. And then walked to that post and then made the right into that low spot, that swale we were hunting there. That might have given us just an extra 5 yards of narrowing it down, if you will. But the other thing I thought was, man, that bird went down so hard, but I don't think it did. Like you said, here's what it did, everybody, and this is the fascinating part. We all know if a bird's going down and its head is still up and it might even have its feet down, that's a runner for sure. But this one cartwheeled. It's like somebody picked him up by the head and just lobbed him sideways, and he went off like a sideways frisbee, and you could see it, which I don't think is near the indication I used to think it was, that that's a dead bird. What do you think?
No, and you, I hadn't heard you say went sideways, which tells me I hit him on the side and pushed him to the right. It would have been in that case, and I've seen that happen when I'm not shooting and I have a different angle when a friend is shooting, and you don't realize it, but when you hit that bird, it actually pushes them.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And you don't see that from your perspective typically because you're over the gun and the recoil and all of that. But like I said, I think I just shot far enough off to the side that I hit his wing, and the way the pellets are, just didn't get up into the head. I shot just a little too far out, hit him with the edge, but I would say the right edge of the pattern, unfortunately.
Yeah.
But on the other hand, I've had situations where I know that bird, I stoned it, and I spent a half an hour in one time trying to find that bird, not this one we're talking about, trying to find a bird I knocked down. And I finally stepped on the dead bird. The dogs never scented it. But before it died, it had burrowed a good 6 or 8 inches into that underneath the grass.
Oh, not surprised at all. Absolutely.
So, it's just, and I've gone back 2-3 hours later and found the bird exactly where I had marked it down. But for whatever reason, the dog couldn't pick up the scent at that point. So another, good point is, if you can, go back a couple hours later and give the dog another shot at it.
Yeah, I think you're right for a whole bunch of reasons. Number one, it might finally expire and hold still. Number two, that gives a little bit of time for some scent to come out of there. But like you said, if they're burrowed down in deep, and we've had that happen in every state in the West, on television too, for that matter, if they're underneath some kind of thick vegetation, it is so hard for any scent to kind of quiver its way through that vegetation. You just got to cross your fingers and hope you got a good dog with a good nose who's willing to dig in deep. And, I joked about it there, but it was absolutely true. What we needed right then and there was a broad-shouldered Labrador that had nothing better to do than dig for birds.
Nope, and I absolutely agree on that. Absolutely agree. And then I've also pulled dead chuckers out of rabbit holes.
Yep, and I had a wire hair that had to dig under a fallen log for a rough grouse. So cross your fingers on that stuff. Just keep trying. That's all. If we can, if we train our dogs a little bit better, that'll help. And I'm working on that every day too. But here we are. Mark, if you had to sum it up, how do you look at a day like that? We sat down and we opened that bottle and had one quick one because I had a long drive back. But what's your kind of top line reaction to a day like that?
It's one of those perfect days. I mean, I don't know we could probably trot out a bunch of cliches. It's just a perfect day. We had good dog work. We had good weather. We had a nice mixed bag of species. It wasn't at the end of the day, while I was tired, I wasn't completely exhausted like a full day of chucker hunting. And by the way, now a full day of checker hunting is a lot fewer hours than it used to be.
Yeah.
Um, and it just, it was in a lot of ways a perfect day, and then to top it all off, we finished it right as it started to rain.
That's yeah, we had feared that all day. You're right. We were going to get together, and if it rained, to heck with it. But if it didn't rain, let's go hunting. And we got lucky until 4:15, I think.
Exactly, just at the right time to head back. And it's just, again, it's just one of those perfect days where, it's kind of like back in the days when I was, if you play sports, I had a team sport, the first thing is about the team winning, and the second thing is about you having a good day. And to me, the team winning is we had good dog work, and we had a good day gunning. We put some birds in the bag to eat, which the ones I got anyway didn't survive Tuesday evening. So, and it's just everything came together. There were no problems. There were no porcupine issues. There were no, we're hunting. And that property, the way we hunt it, in a lot of cases, except for one little spot, we're not anywhere near any roads that can cause a problem. It's just, just a perfect day.
I can't argue that one bit. What I can tell you is it was perfect for so many different reasons. But again, every time I take a dog with somebody else and their dog, I worry about all the things that everybody worries about when dogs get along. But you have 3 dogs and I have 1 dog, and they all seem to get along. And that's not always the case. Maybe you've had one of those. I know I've brought somebody else with dogs like that, and it is so nice to see dogs. Not only do they get along, but they're so beautiful. I mean, what they did out there. And I'm going to just add one more thing. We talk about this a lot in NAVHDA, but it's true of your setters too, who can, of course, test in the NAVHDA program as well. But the point is, the day before, we hunted Hungarian partridge in wide open country where 400 yards was a pretty tight range for all of our dogs. And yet here we were in a creek bottom, and the dogs were working nice and tight and working every bit of that cover, at 30 to 150 yards, depending on where we were. And the instinctive drives these dogs have to do the things they do, from covering the ground to finding the birds to retrieving the birds, all those things continue to dazzle me every day. And then you look at them on the drive home and you think, wow, aren't we lucky? Aren't you lucky, Mark?
Absolutely. Absolutely. It's about, at the end of the day, it's about the dog work. And I think we talked about this before. I've been hunting almost continuously since the 1st of September. And as I get later into the season, it's really about getting the dogs out and running them. I've had plenty of chances to shoot at birds and so on and so forth, but it's just nice to get out and watch them run.
Yeah.
Particularly if we can get out in big open country. And also, to your point, these dogs, we hunt them on multiple upland species, and it never ceases to amaze me how they learn to adjust their range depending on what we're doing.
Absolutely. And that, go ahead.
And the last thing is, I tend to hunt the same places, over the last 20 plus years. And it's kind of funny. Once a dog learns some ground, I've had dogs that will literally run over. I mean, I'll put them on the ground, and they'll run over to where they know the birds are supposed to be.
Oh, that's...
they just ignore. In fact, real quick, I had one time where I got involved in a American field trial, a qualifier, and they needed to have more dogs for it. Long story short, we were running on ground that I hunted all the time, and my one dog, as soon as we put him on the ground at the breakaway, he just takes off to the south, to the northeast, and goes right on point.
That's my training every training day.
That's right. It's his home field. He knew exactly where in fact, the judge goes, "Where's he going?" I go, "He's going to go point birds because that's what he does over there."
I love it.
It's really amusing.
They are creatures of habit, and God bless him for it.
Yeah.
I love it. Well, Mark Avolio is on that end. I'm Scott Linden on this end. You're listening to the Upland Nation podcast. A lot more to talk about. I'm giving away a prize. You just got to answer a simple question. We're going to talk about your hunts last weekend. But Mark, I'm going to turn you loose. Thank you so much again for that hunt, for your hospitality, and let's do it again sometime soon.
Well, let's. And my pleasure, too.
Thank you so much. Bye-bye.
You bet. Bye.
The rest of you, stick around. Dr. Tim's natural performance dog food is Flick's food of choice, and I'll tell you why. I told you he did 50 miles in 3 days, and during those 3 days, I don't feed in the morning because I don't want to run the risks of there's performance questions, and then there's stomach twist questions and all that. So Flick gets fed at the end of the day. If you're doing the same thing, you want to ensure that that single meal of the day has everything your performance dog needs. The right kind of fats, for example, the right kind of proteins in the right proportions to fuel your dog's peak performance. Well, Dr. Tim takes all that into consideration because he's racing sled dogs, and he knows that that's critical as well. Learn more in two places. First at drtims.com, drtims.com, where you can read up on all of these things and why they're so important. Then watch the videos on my YouTube channel and see graphically why these things are so important. Got lots of dog nutrition and performance videos there that you can learn more from as well. Don't forget, Dr. Tim will deliver free, and you'll get a 30% discount on your first order. Just use Upland Nation as the code at checkout. And if you're ever out our way, somewhere in the West, and you're traveling about looking for things to do, and you maybe want to shoot a little bit, or if you are shopping for a new shotgun, take a look at my friends at midvalleyclays.com. Midvalleyclays.com. They've got a shooting school, and you might recognize some of the terrain out there. We shot the pilot for Clay Target Shootout there a few years back. It's an incredible facility with every kind of clay target sport available to you. An RV park, so if you want to stay for a couple days, maybe work on some shotgun shopping, or try every one of the games from sporting to five stand to skeet and trap. It's all right there at Mid-Valley Clays. Learn more about them at midvalleyclays.com. They'll help you with your shotgun shopping. They'll help you with your shooting. Take a lesson and tell Dave Fiedler and Chris Greenwood I said hello. We're back with the Upland Nation Puzzler, and then a summary of your last hunts. We're going to go through some of your comments, and they are good. First off, the puzzler for this week. Remember, at the end of December, you'll get a late Christmas present, or at least one of you will. A Scott Linden Signature Series over-the-shoulder Jaeger lead. This one's in camouflage. It's got a slip loop, so if you're a retriever kind of guy, you know the drill on that. But even if you're not, it's a great and convenient way to control your dog, keep the lead handy, and then also slip it on, slip it off very easily. Simple question. Look it up if you have to. I don't mind. And then Facebook message me. Any of the pages will do. Here it is. Do you know what Jaeger in German means in English? And I'll just spell it. Jaeger is spelled Jaeger. What does Jaeger mean in German? So I asked you how your last hunt went, and boy, did I get some comments. Love them all. They're spectacular. Eric Kopang says he found 3 coveys of bobs in 2 hours in South Texas. Man, that sounds like a great story. I am a little jealous, Eric, but congratulations. And speaking of great finds, his setter retrieved a downed quail that he would have never found without her. Yeah, it does happen once in a while. That's conservation success. Absolutely, Eric. David DeSmither says 60 mph plus winds. The house is clean. Okay, I think I get it. Think about it out there. My good friend Lance Larson, woodcarver extraordinaire, said they went on their first Mearns quail hunt. Zane pointed to Covey, got his first ever Mearns quail in the bag, and I love it. Lance's 13-year-old Weimaraner Mauser, good boy Mauser, walked by his side the whole hunt. Rob Daniels saw the most pheasants he's ever seen. No, not there, in Illinois. Travis Hampton, were you out there with me? 6 miles, 1,800 vertical feet, loads of birds, great dog work. Helped a buddy get his first Hungarian partridge. Right on, you deserve a blue ribbon. Dan Lenson, good, but running low on roosters. He's blaming it on the drought and habitat. Yeah, it's almost always part of the equation. John Good had a good hunt in, good, hell, I can't even see the tailgate under all those birds in South Dakota. Of course, there's about 9 dogs up there trying to get the glory, which means there's probably about 14 hunters back there. Incredible hunt. Congratulations and say hello to all my friends out there in Pierre. Jason Mittman says, miles of walking, skittish birds with, hey, John Whitwell, Deuce, Trooper, and Bailey. And I hope that photo is just set up. It's an overturned old car with 2 dogs and a couple birds, 3 dogs and a couple birds in the foreground, all the better. Yeah, just a scenic opportunity. George Cummins, always great to see your pictures of Samson. So glad he's doing so well. Colin Smith did a lot of walking, flushed a rooster in Wisconsin. Oh yeah, and then 2 does. What's the limit on does these days? And then Chris Bridwell, wish I was there. He was at the NFR in Vegas. I sure miss going to that. Used to work in that business a little bit. Loved when they left OKC for Las Vegas, that's for sure. Thank you all for your summaries, your great hunts. I'm sure you're having a great time right now. If you're listening to us on the way out or the way back, thank you for doing that. In fact, all of that brought to you by findbirdhuntingspots.com. New material every week to help you find places to hunt, train, care for your dog. Did a story on a dog that almost came back from the dead to become a versatile champion in the NAVDA program. Thank you so much to Scratch and for owner Nancy Annisfield for being a subject. An inspirational and incredible story. Take it all in at findbirdhuntingspots.com. And thank you all for listening. If you enjoy what you hear at the Upland Nation podcast, please tell a friend. That's how we grow. Stay in touch at the Wing Shooting USA and the Upland Nation Facebook pages. We can always talk there. Merry Christmas to everybody, including a special treat in your stocking for those who left ratings and reviews at Apple Podcasts. I'll leave you with this. I don't know where this belongs. Maybe on a welcome mat at the front door. Wherever you can find a place for it, I can guarantee it. It says, if you're uncomfortable around my dog, that's okay. I'm happy to lock you in the other room when you come over. I'm Scott Linden. Thanks for listening. Be safe. Have a great holiday. See you in the field.